At Ventum Financial, we believe that sharing another person's story is a privilege. The people inspiring and activating others, role modeling what's possible, solving problems today, and building for a better tomorrow. Who is relevant is subjective, but what if we turn the dial? Leaning into the courageous leaders who quietly drive positive change. This is ReleVant, where leaders, creators, and change makers share the ideas shaping business, culture, and the world, one conversation at a time. In this episode, I sit down with Silken Laumann, Olympic rower, author, founder of the charity Unsinkable, and one of Canada's most beloved athletes. Her story is about what it means to rebuild through body, mind, and spirit. Silken is living proof that resilience isn't a single act of strength, but a lifelong practice of choosing optimism, even when it hurts. She works through experience as a journey forever. There is no start or end date for Silken. The tools that she gathers from one experience, she employs to the next. Her strength and resilience, developed as a child and Olympian, still stays with her today. Here's my conversation with Silken Laumann on optimism, strength, and where it truly matters, to be unsinkable. This is ReleVant, where people are discovered. Thank you for joining me. Debbie McGrath with Ventum Financial and ReleVant. Today, we're speaking with Silken Laumann, four-time medal Olympian. Good morning, Silken. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
What a location.
And what a location. So here we are on Lake Ontario today. In late October, it's generally kind of chilly. I'm going to guess that you actually used to row in these temps.
I used to row at the Dawn Rowing Club in Mississauga, and this was, a place we'd sometimes go for training, but we were actually competitors of the Argo Rowing Club, the Dawn Rowing Club, and I've had this friendly competition going. So it's nice, it's good they let me in the boat.
I was going to say you got in the house to steal the secrets of the future.
Exactly.
Well, then I'm glad that we're down here today with you. And you have just come in from Victoria, stopped by, and your home is now in New Zealand. Is that right?
Yeah, New Zealand. I got kids in Victoria. Canada is still a huge part of my life.
So you were a huge part of my growing up and the spirit of the Olympics. To let you know, I always wonder whether Olympians are aware of the impact that you have on so many of us and carry that spirit that is so special to Canada. But I remember your story growing up. I remember watching you and cheering you on. So this is, for me, a huge honor to meet you. Because I remember it so well. And I always wonder, as an Olympian, are you aware of how special you are for those of us who, frankly, are not very good at anything, but want Canadians to excel and are so proud of them on the world stage?
There's that kind of when you're in it, when you're competing as an Olympian, that's really all you're thinking about. You're not really thinking about impact on others. I think it's more when I retired and I would meet people like you, that especially had watched the Olympics at a very influential time in their life, often when they were somewhere between 9 and 15. Those are times, I think, in young people's lives where they are very open to inspiration and they're looking for what they might become. And so I think it's been more afterwards I've recognized, what I might mean to some people. But, at the end of the day, I'm the same person I was before.
Of course.
I competed. I loved the privilege and the opportunity to compete at sport at the very highest level. Is a lot of pressure. It was a lot of stress, but it was also the thing that I wanted to do. And it was incredibly rewarding.
So when you started your journey, when you think back to your teens, when did you know that you might have had the special it factor to take something so far?
I don't think I did for quite a long time. I was inspired when I was about 11 watching the 1976 Olympics. It was in Montreal, if you remember. And like so many other people around the world, it was Nadia Comaneci,
Right. The 10 score.
Yeah, the 10 score. And I think her presence and her confidence at such a young age really struck me. And obviously I wasn't going to be a gymnast, right? So I did a lot of other sports. And Not very well. I was tall, kind of gangly, kind of uncoordinated, so I could run in a straight line, figured that out. And then when I got on a boat, I didn't even think I rode in a straight line for a long time, but the repetition, the combination, I think, of power and endurance really suited my body type, but also my mentality.
And who introduced you to rowing?
My older sister. Yeah, my older sister. I was a cross-country runner. My older sister was already rowing. And I just got to that place in running where I was going to have to make a decision. Was I going to spend my life dieting to stay,
right,
whatever it was, 65 kilos, which was kind of where I was, or was I going to let my body turn into what it was meant to be?
Right.
Yeah.
And do you and your sister still speak about rowing? Do you still have that connection?
Yeah, we do. I mean, my sister and I went to the 84 Olympics together. She was my double partner, or actually I was hers because she's my older sister. And we won a bronze medal together.
Right.
So, and then she went on and, I obviously got a real life, became a lawyer, moved away. So we do have that special bond of having done something together with a very influential coach too in Mississauga.
So let's talk a little bit about you developing into rowing. So you've decided to pursue it, but by the inspiration of your sister. And then what happens? When do you know you now need to find a coach?
It's almost like anything we do in life. Everything happens over time. Mm-hmm. So, I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. I became a track athlete first. And then over time, I won the Ontario Championships. I won the Canadian Championships. And for me, the timeline was very quick. So, I went from learning to row to a year later being on the national team.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's not the normal trajectory of most athletes. But because I'd done running before, I transitioned to rowing faster. I think it was more for me about competing on the world stage very quickly, and then having to have my knowledge and my maturity as an athlete catch up to where I was in my... So it's almost like you took on a job that was too big for you, and
right,
how you got it. And then you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how to do it.
Yes.
And that was kind of how my career started.
Amazing. So it starts to take off in rowing, and you're obviously traveling. What is that like as an individual of taking that track? Are you certain at that point that the Olympics has got you destined, or is it unfolding and you see where the trajectory is going? What was on your mind at that time?
When I first started competing on the international stage, I was 17 years old. And so I hadn't even finished high school. Yeah. Like a lot of athletes, right? You kind of reach your maturity as an athlete relatively young. So that was what I lived and breathed. I mean, I wanted to be an Olympian. I wanted to be a world champion. It's the first thing I thought of when I got up in the morning. My whole life centered around that. This is what I want to do. And I think that's true for many, many Olympic athletes, that they're kind of consumed by the sport. And I think that I have this hyper focus too, that even takes it to the next level, that when I'm really focused on something, I can really block everything else out. But I never really thought of where it was going beyond that. I hope to win a world championship and I hope to win an Olympic medal. But I never thought like, oh, this is going to be like, I'm going to become a speaker and I'm going to segue into all these other things because I rowed. I got an education. I did my undergrad in English, which, I don't know what I was thinking there, except I love reading and I loved, story. I love stories. And as it turned out, it was probably a perfect degree to get. I remember my dad asking, like, what are you going to do with an English degree? It
has all evolved.
Yeah, it's all evolved very nicely.
So tell me a little bit about what's that dedication like? So when you talk about being hyper-focused, and that's what you thought about in the morning, tell me about your life revolving around that, because certainly I've read Unsinkable. Just to let you know, it's so unbelievably inspiring. I did accidentally leave it in Mexico City last weekend, and I was very upset when I was heading out to the airport about that. But then I thought about the gift I left somebody else.
Somebody else.
So somebody in Mexico City, I hope, is reading your story now.
It's really nice. And I can get you another copy.
Thank you. I actually have quite a few.
Okay.
That I brought you today. Anyway, so I was thinking about what is that like when you had that dedication and that focus? Tell me about what your typical day would have been like when you were training.
You know, my husband is an entrepreneur, and we often talk about the kind of focus that we both have and the sort of like the desire that I had and the willingness to do things that other people were not willing to do. So like a lot of people, you know, want to be successful or they dream of success, but when it really comes down to it, it's a pretty relentless pursuit. And it's making a lot of choices to, you know, train every day, to be exhausted, to give up your social life to a large degree, put a lot of other things in life on hold. But it never felt like a sacrifice. It felt like this is what you need to do in order to get that. And, you know, Patch, who's my husband, who started Good Life Fitness, talks about that too. You know, how he had one club and then he wanted two, and then he wanted four, and this development, but it was this singular focus. And I think that's something we share as a couple. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to kind of, you know, together kind of reflect on. And he always says, you know, I was willing to do things that other people weren't willing to do. And I think that's true for me too. Like I was willing to work harder, lift more, give up more in order to win, because I just was one of those people who had that extraordinary ability to want and to focus.
And when you think about that focus and the desire to win, with that for you and your psychology at the time, do you see things in black and white? Is it either that was a success and a win and this was a failure? Or are you able to, at that age, think, this is experience, I'm gaining, I'm filling my basket with skill? Where's your headspace at that point?
I think the headspace of understanding that everything we do in life, you know, accumulates and brings us to a place, you know, the place that we're supposed to be. If we're kind of all along asking questions like, am I in the right place? Does this feel good? But I mean, I was 17 years old and I didn't have that perspective. And I would say I was very black and white at that period in my life where it was like, I failed, you know, or, oh, I won. But I always was on the side of feeling insecure and never feeling enough, never feeling like I'd done enough. And that was actually a very destructive mindset, because even when I achieved, I mean, I remember making the national team when I was 17 years old and then going to the World Championships, and we only came in like 8th, and I was just devastated and I wanted to quit and I was in tears, rather than going like, oh my God, I'm 17 years old.
Right,
you know,
what I've accomplished.
That's what I've accomplished. It was always this sense of it was never enough. And that took me a long time to really get past that. My failure was not a failure, that what I perceived to be a failure was actually part of my development as a person. And that, you know, the expectation that you'll succeed is, you know, every time is just can be very limiting, and the perfectionism can be very limiting. And so, you know, it was actually doing therapy and, you know, figuring out sort of why I was like that later in life that really helped me let go of that attitude. And we can talk about that later, but it's really about, you know, how free you become when you're able to let go of that perfectionism and really just show up fully to everything that you're doing, but not try to control the outcome.
Well, speaking of your family and the impact of how things, I guess, motivated you or kept you focused, or specifically when you talk about accepting yourself as enough, how much do you think your upbringing was part of that? One, motivated you, but also may have held you back from taking in a moment.
Yeah, I always say that, like, it's actually good to have a little bit of dysfunction in your life, because I think for me, it made me probably more determined, more independent, I think. So, you know, in my family, there's a lot of love. My dad was an entrepreneur, definitely very driven. My mom's an artist. So, I think I had a very rich life in terms of being exposed to like the arts. My dad was physically active, all of that. But my mom had an undiagnosed mental illness. So there was a huge amount of unpredictability in our family. And I think what that did for me was it made me want to be very self-determining. And I wanted to sort of separate from almost like that family and like from a pretty young age. And I wanted to have a different kind of life. And those things, I think they were helpful in the beginning of my rowing career, because I knew that my success was going to be my own. Like it was going to be because I worked hard, because I made it happen.
Yeah.
And also, I think there was a tenacity and a determination that was born from, a degree of dysfunction as a kid. That's still part of my DNA today, right? I am a very tenacious person. When I decide that I'm going to create something or something's worth doing, I don't give up very easily.
So would you say that your mom sort of pushed you in that pact of, was it needing to prove to her or needing to prove to yourself that you could do it?
Yeah, I mean, in my younger days, I didn't really think about it, right? Sure. It was just, who I was. But upon reflection, I think it was more that there were qualities that I developed. One was this fierce independence. One was sort of not wanting to get sucked into that negativity of mental illness, as it was for her at a time where mental illness wasn't understood as well. And certainly people didn't go out seeking diagnosis. That would have been a very different life path for my mom had that been the case.
So what gift have you taken that to pass on to your children?
Well, first of all, a huge amount of empathy and compassion. I think I see the world differently than a lot of people. I see people's vulnerability. I see their humanity. I look for it. I think having suffered, having been a child who was, having been a child who was very vulnerable because there was a lot of emotional abuse that was not my mom's fault, but because of her illness, it was there. And so I am always looking at ways of making people's lives better. And especially when it comes to young people, I really understand how alone they can feel, how it is so important to feel supported. And I really believe that even when people take negative actions and they, seem to not be kind, that a lot of that comes from what they've experienced in life. So it's given me this gift of compassion and connection and empathy to people that I feel like has been incredibly important in my post-Olympic life.
I joined Ventum because I was looking for a firm that was independent, entrepreneurial, and allowed you to be your very best self at work.
I was with them previously and came back because it felt like a family to me. And I haven't been able to replicate that culture really anywhere else.
It's been amazing energy so far and great camaraderie amongst our team.
And there's a real sense of teamwork, which in turn creates a highly collaborative and intellectually stimulating work environment.
I'm excited about working in an organization that has a commitment to a service culture enabled by empowering people, continuous improvement, and process reengineering.
Ventum is a leading independent company with an exciting future. We have a very strong platform.
Someone would like to join Ventum because of the firm's commitment to enhancing not only the experience of their employees, but also the experience of their clients.
We distinctly and passionately believe that if we give our investment advisors, our frontline capital markets professionals, the tools and the resources that they need, that they will take care of our mutual end client.
Turning up for people This is Ventum. And when you think about some of the charity that you've built, so Unsinkable is beyond the book. So why don't you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So I mean, Unsinkable, same name as my book, right? So it kind of was born from the idea in the book that didn't really happen till after I published it and realized that my story wasn't unique. I mean, when you're in your room writing your story, it's just you and the story. You're not really thinking about how it's going to affect people. But once I put it out there in the world, and also with that, I needed to stand in my truth, and I needed to come fully into my authentic self, which meant that I had to acknowledge, and I acknowledged publicly, that this was part of my story. So in a way, this idea that Silken Laumann was invincible and she had so much courage, and she overcame her accident in 1992, and that was a very two-dimensional picture of me. And by writing the book, I invited this other picture of me, which is that I didn't always have everything together, that I had struggled with my own mental illness, that I'd found raising kids while pursuing a career brought me to my knees at times. And so in doing that, I started a conversation around the book with people. And what I would hear over and over again was, well, this is my story, or you inspired me to go to counseling, or like, wow, I didn't realize that depression and rage could be so closely connected. So there were all these insights other people were having. And I mean, I didn't think of that when I was writing my book. And that got me thinking about how story can really change people's thinking, shifts people's thinking. I've been a storyteller my whole life as a speaker and as a writer. And, in Unsinkable, I had this idea that people's stories are inspiring.
So Unsinkable's had a really big impact, not only for you, for being the author of it, but also on the people that have received it. And tell me, what motivated you to write Unsinkable? When did you feel like you had a story that needed to be shared?
I think I got to the place because I was a speaker and I was writing. And as I kind of went down the path of therapy and started to understand like how all of these things were connected, my personality, some things I was struggling with, and how rooted they were in my past experiences. And so I was on this healing journey, but I wasn't sharing any of it. And I just remember one day speaking on stage thinking, I can't tell the story anymore because I've got this other story that's so much related to my Olympic story that I'm not telling. It started to feel like I was almost hiding something.
Right, lacking the authenticity of what's really the full thread and fabric of who you are.
Exactly. And so then I started sharing it. And, on the book tour, I really recognized how many people had a story. And that's really how Unsinkable was born, with this idea that we needed to tell these stories. The transforming power of some of the things we're doing in Unsinkable still take me aback. And the thing about when we're struggling with our mental health, almost like when we're struggling with anything, we feel very alone. It's very isolating. And so when you hear other people talking openly about how they struggled, how they, here they're like this really successful entrepreneur and they're doing so well, and you think, oh, like it's always been that way. And then they talk about not being able to leave their room.
Right.
And you think, oh, okay, there's another story here. So that's been a very rewarding aspect of Unsinkable that I've seen unfolding.
So as you have transitioned in your career from Olympian to author to motivational speaker, is there another book in the works?
There is another book very much in the works. It's gone through its first edit, and its working title is Epiphany. And I don't know if it'll end up that way, but the idea that the thread that holds the story together is really about epiphanies and moments in my life where I've learned something, or I've shifted my thinking, I've shifted the way that I approach life. So again, it's not very linear, but it is about those. It actually starts off with something that happened in February, which while hiking a very remote track in New Zealand, I was stung by a wasp. And I had an anaphylactic shock reaction, lost consciousness.
Wow. Did you know that you were allergic to bees in advance?
I knew that I had a possible anaphylactic reaction 2 years before. And the doctor in emergency had said, oh, you should probably carry an EpiPen or think about it as precaution. And it wasn't really a sure thing. So most of the time I carried an EpiPen. I did have an EpiPen on the little track that I was on. So I lost consciousness for 25 minutes. Unfortunately, I did not just have one reaction. I had 2 reactions.
Wow.
And make a long story short, I was rescued by a bunch of volunteers who climbed up a cliff bank 10 minutes before I had a second reaction that would have killed me. So that was kind of how the book starts, which is this epiphany that it can end at any moment. And I think that's really what the book had been in the works for 5 years. But then I was like, man, I almost died. Like, for real, I had a helicopter rescue. I mean, this was really bad.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And then the things that I had been putting off or thinking was not as urgent became very urgent.
So we were speaking about your moment up on the hill, on the trail, and when you leave by helicopter, and that being a really pivotal point for you. And thinking about making every moment matter, and the moment that you never want to let get away again. I think about COVID as being that warning for many of us of the fragility of life, making every moment matter, and taking that in. And what sits at the end of that is optimism, which is something that you speak of. So tell me about your journey around hope and optimism.
Yeah, optimism is interesting because I do believe in feeling whatever emotions you feel. So on the one hand, you can get this positivity that's really about negating any emotions that are negative, which is not healthy. For me, it's this balance of exposing myself to things that build my happiness, my joy, my hope. And I'm very aware of how things affect me, how certain people make me feel drained, how nature fills my cup, and how too much exposure to the news, to negative people, to environments that drain my energy actually reduce my ability to be effective. So there's all these things happening in the world. It's very, very difficult times. And for our kids, I think a lot of us who have kids think, how can we help them? How can we help them be resilient enough to excel and, even survive these really difficult times? And I always think about the only thing you can really control is yourself and your area of influence. And so if I'm going to get, paralyzed by the problems in the world, paralyzed by, the negativity that is happening all around us with the U.S. being so close to us, I think of my optimism almost like a superpower. Like, if I can build that, if I can preserve that, I know that's kind of like the foundation where I can make things happen, because I think beyond what is today. I think beyond, the problem and say, oh, how can I be a little part of that solution? So during COVID, when so many young people were struggling with mental health, and we were talking to adults about how hard things were, I asked the question, well, who's talking to the kids? Like, they must, they didn't get to go to a prom, and, they had just started a relationship with their first boyfriend or girlfriend, and now their whole world has changed.
Yeah.
And that's when, yeah, exactly. And that's when we launched Unsinkable, and we put together this television show in 25 days with everybody on the team doing things that were completely unrealistic in order to put this production together. So that's a strength. We all need to be aware. And I think that comes to, as we get older, we start to be more aware of how outside things influence our inside. And probably the most empowering thing that I've learned is how to let go of people who will always see the glass half empty, because that affects my optimism, that affects my energy.
We can walk this road till our days grow old. In this life we've built together, and we just begun. The best is still yet to come.
Better health is a lifelong journey. Choose the right healthcare partner. MedCan.
So I often sit in a space where I oscillate on technology. So I think there's a lot of people who see technology, particularly for our children, as you mentioned, as a negative, and that it keeps them. And it's interesting how you were saying about energy and people around you, because I've thought about that myself. And what are our guardrails for that, either for people in our life or the stories that we're reading, particularly our algorithms can suddenly feed us everything in either a positive or a negative realm. And we speak about our kids as having a lot of challenges today, particularly with what we see in environmental and climate concern, and then what we see geopolitically. I reflect about what our grandparents must have lived through world wars, horrific, Great Depression, horrific, let alone, what it would have been like to obviously arrive in these countries and be unprepared. And I oscillate between which generation may have had it worse, but I think where I land at the end of the day, and interested in your thought, is one, technology can keep us connected in a very special way that previous generations didn't, and it sits in a place where either it could be positive or negative. And I think about how isolating it actually must have been in our grandparents' and our great-grandparents' time to be going through those major moments and not having someone who you could just say, today I'm down, or talk to me. However, on the other hand,
it's such a double-edged sword, isn't it? Like just kind of what you're inferring, is that on the one hand, we have FaceTime, we have Zoom, we have all this ways of connecting. My kids can connect with their granddad, across the country. That's amazing. And technology, of course, encompasses so many things, but I think really we're talking about social media, and we're talking about AI and those kind of things that, especially for parents and grandparents, feels really scary because we don't understand it.
Sure.
So I have a couple thoughts. One, I think it's really important that when children are young, they are not exposed to their phones, to the internet, to social too early. I think that ability to be children, to play in creative ways, to not see the bigger world when they're still developing, when they're little. I think kids deserve to be little and protected, and
the innocence of it.
Yeah, the innocence of it. And I think we should do whatever we can to allow children to be in a little bit of that special time, because it is a unique time in human development, the childhood. You're developing your brain, all your synapses, everything that you're going to become is developed in those early years. So I think it's very important that we protect that. My kids were kind of the generation where they got phones kind of in their tween years, and they were kind of ready for it at that time developmentally. And then the question is how much, what things, can they see, what things can't they see? And I think it's important, as parents, to stay with the times, understanding what's out there, understanding, what parental controls you can put out there. By the time our kids are in teenagers, of course, it's a free-for-all out there. And so hopefully we can't protect them. What we can do is give them the tools. We can give them the tools to be discerning, to ask questions like, what's real information? And the other day, I think it was yesterday, because I was on a plane and I got on Instagram, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at these dogs and all the rescues they're doing. And I'm realizing some of this is AI generated. But of course, you see, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, because I didn't even occur to me that it would be AI generated, right? And so that's a lack of knowledge on my part. And the more we can help them be discerning, the better off I think they're going to be.
That it's interesting that you should say that. So I have noticed just within the last sort of 3 weeks, my feed has been filled and populated with AI. And the question for us now going forward, exactly as you said, is what is real and what isn't. And that is something that nobody really globally has ever experienced before. We don't know what we're looking at as to whether that's authentic or not. And that's really a bit of a brain crumble moment of what is the impact of that? What does the future of it look like? And good Lord, what's the impact?
Yeah. And, that's a question. Like, I don't have any idea what that world looks like.
I've never been exposed to it.
And it does seem to be that there's always this lag time between something, being innovated and being out there, and then how we understand the consequences of it.
Of course.
And then we put controls on it as society, as a community. You see this generation of parents, for instance, the 20-somethings parents. And a lot of them are being very mindful about the phones and technology with their kids because they grew up with too much of it. And at the time it was Facebook, right? Very early in their lives. So I don't know. I mean, the AI thing, we're going to work it out as we go. And I can only hope that, people are smart, and sometimes we wonder that, but yeah, people really are smart. And I think there's this natural desire to see real things, to discern the fake from the real. And I think that over time, that desire for authenticity will be even greater because so much of what's being presented in the world is not authentic.
It's veneered. Mm-hmm. So in your trajectory, what do you see as next? Epiphany is coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think maintaining relevance is an interesting challenge as we get older, and we also transition from one career to another. I've got a lot to do, and I'm a naturally curious person, and so I've really followed my curiosity in life, and that's led me to all sorts of iterations, first an athlete, then a speaker, then a writer and a speaker, starting a charity, hosting a podcast, Inflection Time, actually, which has been a really great platform for exploration because I speak to, people who've had pretty remarkable lives, like a Haley Wickenheiser on one hand, a Chef Joe Friday, a Biff Naked, like a very large range of pretty remarkable Canadians about their journeys. And that keeps me curious. And it also has really inspired me that, there isn't an age necessarily that you have to say, okay, like now I'm not going to work. I'm not going to do this. I don't think that's going to be my path. I really do see working for the rest of my life, but it'll always be in an exploration. So it'll either be writing or hosting something or, running a charity or raising money. I like to be engaged. I like to be learning. So it's a gift that I'm able to do that. I don't have a, firm retirement date. I don't have something that I am, and then I'm not that,
right? The strength and resilience is a huge component of what makes you so unique and been so powerful as a motivational speaker and a writer. Do you want to delve into that a little bit and how it is that evolved for you? And how does the audience can benefit from some of your learnings?
I am strong. And I know that whatever happens to me in life, I do have the ability to get through. And I guess some of that really comes from that I've been through a lot. Growing up in a house where I just never knew what I was coming home to. Was my mom going to be sitting on the couch crying, drinking? Was she going to be throwing things? Was she going to be singing and super happy and joyful? And I think that was really hard, and it developed a strength inside me that I had to not only survive, I had to make my life. And then, my accident in 1992, when I was favored to win a gold medal, I went through a divorce when my kids were 2 and 4. I have a child with autism, profoundly affected by autism, and that's been needed a lot of strength. I'm married to a serial entrepreneur, I call him, but somebody who has a big personality, a big life, and I really have to stand as an equal with that person. Might be like it's a lot of life and living, and it's all been wonderful, but it has required strength. All my children are neurodiverse in one way or another, and I've had to fight for them. I think when you've been through a series of really tough things, and, with my own mental health, times where I was so close to slipping into that deep, deep depression and somehow just missed it. Knowing that you've been close, that you've had really difficult things and gotten through them, I think becomes kind of a power in itself, that I have this knowing inside myself that whatever happens in my life and what is still yet to come, because challenges are one of those things. Like, I remember after 1992, I had this big event that happened in the public eye, and I thought, oh, well, at least that happened early in my life, and because, the bad thing is over, that's off my list. And it's, then you realize life is just all these cycles of difficult things. And, you have periods where there doesn't seem to be a lot that's difficult happening. And then you go through years where, where all things seem to be a challenge. It's the knowing that I'm going to make it through it. And how do we get that knowing? And that's, I guess, where having some challenge in our life and kind of embracing that. And I also think that when we take risks in life, I've never been one to sort of sit in my life and try to be safe. And that you're going to get more challenges. Like, if you're putting yourself out there and you're being a public person, every time you're a public person, somebody could cancel you. Somebody could, take issue with what you're saying or how you're thinking. So I have never shied away from that. And that takes some courage. But I guess I feel that one of my purposes in this world is to take what I'm learning, to take what I'm living. I've been given these experiences for a reason. And in my own being, I really feel that reason is to translate it in a way that encourages and supports other people, to let them feel somehow from me that, what, you're okay. You're going to do this. You have everything that you need to excel in the thing you want to excel in, or to get through the challenge that you're personally facing. So it really feels like purpose for me. And that's what keeps me wanting to keep working, I guess, is just, well, I've learned all this stuff and I've suffered and I've gotten through. And so why wouldn't I continue to share it?
Yeah, your gift is sharing your story to encourage others to also follow a light.
And my story isn't static, because that's not life. It's not a static story. If we're still out there and we're still taking risks and we're still challenging ourselves, the stuff is going to keep happening. Both my parents have dementia right now. And, that's a whole nother challenge of seeing your parents and the vulnerability that's involved as the dementia progresses. And so, I'm just going to keep talking about what I'm experiencing, what I'm challenged with, what I find gives me strength, with the knowledge that we're all connected.
Yep. There's a piece of advice that has relevance to you that you gained at some point that you use now. What would that be?
Well, it's funny that you use the word relevant, because I think that's something that as we move through our careers, we all struggle with. Like, for me, maintaining relevance is not really about maintaining relevance. It's about staying engaged. You know, when we're curious, as I know you are, as I am, we want to know what's happening in people's lives. We want to know what's happening in younger people's lives. And that in itself creates relevance, because we want to understand the world as it's unfolding right now. And in that understanding, we have both our wisdom that does come just with age if we're living life right. But then we're also engaged in the now. And that is what relevance really is, right? Is that you're still engaged in the now and the challenges are presenting themselves. And I remember a piece of advice that still is relevant for me today is this idea that we can have everything, right? We can have so many of the experiences in our life that we sort of want to fulfill and have, you know, whether that's the desire to travel, whether that's desire to parent in some way. But it all kind of has its season. Like when I think back to when my children were young, I wasn't super fit when my children were young. I walked, I did jumpies when they were playing soccer, and I didn't have a lot of personal time. And then I went through a divorce, and then on weekends, sometimes I had personal time. And then like I was in those career days, when I was balancing the family, I often thought, oh, I have so many things I still want to do, and it's so frustrating, but then I never thought that I would be entering my 60s and wanting to work so much. So I think we do have time, and that's a big piece of advice that is still relevant today, even though I have less time, is that when we use our time wisely, when you're raising kids, you're really raising kids. And when you're in your career, you're really in your career. And then, there's this time in life that I'm in now where I'm still very engaged, but I also have more ease. I don't have as much sort of desperation to get everything done all at once. I'm more like, things are unfolding. They will unfold the way they're supposed to unfold, and it will all get done.
Right. The letting go.
A lot of letting go. And if there's one singular piece of advice I would offer younger people, the sooner that you're able to let go of the outcome, the happier you'll be, because that's what makes us unhappy, is this false belief that we actually control the outcome. We don't control we can do everything right. At the Olympics in 1996, I was so prepared for those Olympics. And I woke up in the morning and there was a tailwind, which means that the wind is kind of pushing you and makes the race faster. And it kind of...
like a sail.
Yeah, and it kind of favors people that are lighter. And I was lighter than most of my competitors. And so I was kind of excited that I had this tailwind.
It's going to be the best.
It's going to be so great. And then just before my race, it turned. And it was a headwind. And I can't control the weather. I know that, And so that was just a moment where, I won a silver medal in that race, and, it was a fantastic race. I wish it would have been a tailwind, but there was nothing I could do about that. And letting go of outcomes and really just embracing, I did my best, I put myself forward, I took a risk, and something's going to unfold. But you don't know what that's going to be.
How much do you think that sits around self-forgiveness too, and allowance of accepting what's happened as what it is rather than what it should have been?
When you're young, there's just this false sense that, you're responsible for everything. You're responsible if you gave a good speech or a great speech or a bad speech, somehow, like sometimes, You never forgive yourself when you make a mistake. And, you're perfectionistic in your appearances. I was perfectionistic about my weight. And it just never leads to happiness and this sort of sense that if I do this and then this, this is going to happen. And that's just not the way that the world works. And there's a lot of unhappiness in that for a lot of young people, right? They think they have to get everything right. And if they didn't get everything right, it's their fault. It is so powerful when you get to a stage in your life, and it could be never, but hopefully it's going to happen, where you really can see that you are not perfect, that you're not supposed to be perfect. And when you make mistakes, you can forgive yourself for them. They're just mistakes. Let them go. You had bad behavior. You were unkind to somebody who loved you. You weren't forthright with your boss. You may have even lied about something. And, we can go on and on in our minds and make up a story about how that makes us a bad person, or the things I've come up with over my lifetime. If I wrote it all out, it's horrifying. But in the end, if we get to a place where we can forgive and see that, we're humans, and humans are very imperfect, and just move on. Just keep moving forward, because you're going to make mistakes again.
Right. Silken, thank you so much for your time today. There's so many pieces that you shared that I am going to put in my toolbox for the future, and I know our audience will too.
Oh, thanks so much. And I really enjoyed our conversation. And yeah, there's just a universality of experience that I think we're all learning from each other.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was ReleVant, short conversations with leaders who turn insight into action. Follow ReleVant on Instagram and LinkedIn at Ventum Financial, or visit our website for show highlights. Thank you for listening and watching ReleVant, where people are discovered. Please subscribe to Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. ReleVant is a podcast developed and produced by Ventum Financial in partnership with Archer & Co. Executive producers and director, Michelle Archer and Phil Kluba. Creative development by Sarah Carter. A special thanks to our amazing film crew, Ivan Cabas, Matt Garassi, Grace Turner, Christine Bays, and Alex Dermer. Thank you for watching and listening.